Welcome to the research paper for physiology majors, Physiology 3062W, for the summer session of 2018. This presentation will be an overview of the project. I am the course director, Dr. Barnett. During this class, you will research and write a term paper based on a topic in physiology. For most of you, the paper will be focused on a topic that you've picked, then researched, the published literature for relevant papers, selected some papers that you want to focus on, and then dive in, understand those papers so that you can write your research paper. There may be a few of you who have lab-based research projects you'd like to write about. You need to get permission for that from your principal investigator, the faculty member in charge of the lab, and you should also discuss it with me as soon as possible. As you already know, this is an independent study course, and your information for the class will be available on the class Canvas site. It will also be the site for your submission of assignments. I recommend checking the Canvas site at least weekly, and if you miss a deadline for assignments that need to be submitted, deductions from the point value of the assignment will add up on a daily basis. The lecture materials will be provided in recorded presentations like this one. Through these presentations, I hope to help you understand what's expected of you, how to begin your literature review, build your outline for your paper, and use your outline to generate a rough draft. Then the rough draft, after it's critiqued, can be used to generate your final draft. For most of you, I will act as your paper advisor and provide you with feedback on your choice of topic, the literature review, and the research articles that you find. And then, of course, as you submit things, the outline, the rough draft, and the final draft. Now, of course, if you already have a faculty member that you're interested in working with, and perhaps you've even talked to them about that, you should make sure that I know that as soon as possible, and you should also make sure that they're still on board for this summer session. I will send them some information related to the class once I have a confirmation that that faculty member is willing to work with you. This also applies if you'd like to write your paper based on a lab-based research project. You'll need the faculty member's approval, and I'll need to communicate with them with some class-related materials. Your objectives in this course will be to pick a topic that is physiologically relevant, then to search the recently published scientific papers on that topic. For the purposes of this course, that means papers published in the last 10 years. You'll then narrow your search to one or two papers that you'll use as your focal point, read and understand your primary papers, and also put together some additional papers that will provide support information. Organize the information you've gathered into an outline for your research paper, submit that for its critique, develop your outline into a rough draft, and then develop your rough draft into a final paper. Now, when it comes to picking a physiologically relevant topic, it should be a topic that is interesting to you so that you'll be motivated to research it and to read about it. It should be related to human physiology. However, many of the papers on human physiological topics also use animal models, and those papers are sometimes preferred for this class because the experiments can be better controlled and they have less experimental variability. Using an animal model paper is not a bad thing, and you should not avoid those materials. Now, your topic can be related to a disease, but it doesn't have to be. And if you do decide to think about a disease, maybe it has to do with your own health, or maybe it has to do with the health of a family member. But the first thing to do is to see whether or not there are relevant and recent published papers on the topic that you're interested in. Now, for many of you, one of the things that might be helpful is to go back to the material that you learned about the physiological system that is the basis of this report, the topic that you're interested in, and review the material that you learned in the Principles of Physiology, Physiology 3061, because it provides you with a foundation of information that you can use as you continue your research. So, as you begin your search, you'll want to look at recently published papers. You want to identify keywords related to your topic. Keywords are simply words that you might expect to find in a topic like this one, whatever your selection is, and we'll go through searching the literature in more detail in the next presentation. Use a search engine to find the research papers, and I say a scientific search engine because those are most focused on relevant papers. Of course, the one that's most commonly used is PubMed, which is publicly available, Ovid Medline, which searches the National Library of Medicine's database, and Google Scholar is a frequent source for students as they search for materials for their classes. Once you've picked your topic, you'll want to find a couple of resources that you can use as your primary sources. And so you'll look at the material, you'll select a couple as your primary sources, and then you'll read and understand them so that you can figure out how the rest of the material that you're finding and through your literature review fits into your project. Before you begin to write, the most important thing is to thoroughly read your primary papers and try to figure out what was the research that was done before they started their own project, what set the stage for them to ask some specific questions in that area of physiology, what hypothesis were they testing, how did they design their experiments, what are their key experimental findings, and how did they interpret their data. And then you'll begin to organize your outline, organize your information into an outline. And by an outline, what we mean is just, what do I want to talk about first, what do I want to talk about next, what do I want to talk about next. And in your outline, I expect to see an introduction, which gives background information and also highlights the hypothesis. I'd like to see some brief discussion of the methods, what kind of subjects did they select and how did they design, what types of parameters did they think they needed to measure, what kind of data did they collect and how did they analyze it, a discussion section which gives the author's impression of what the results mean and how it fits into the field. And then I'd also like you to contribute your interpretation. How do you feel like this answers the questions that you were interested in? If you write a very good outline, it makes it much easier to write your rough draft because you just go to each section of the outline, you look at what you've put as the content for that section, and you start to write paragraphs and sentences that will provide that content. Once you have an outline, the next job is then to convert it into a rough draft. The outline here is shown for example purposes only. I would hope that your outline actually has details instead of just bullet points that say main point. But you'll take that outline, and then for each of the main points you start to write paragraphs, and that leads you to a rough draft. Eventually, after you have a rough draft, it'll have to be reviewed and edited, and maybe it'll cause you to rearrange some information, maybe it'll cause you to throw information out, but the review of the rough draft, critically reading it, and also getting a critical review from someone else like me helps you to sharpen it up, polish it, and turn it into your final draft for the course. So, this is just an overview of what we've just talked about. Your objectives are to select a physiologically relevant topic, to search the literature for scientific papers on that topic, to narrow that search to 1 or 2 papers that you can use as a focal point, then read and understand those papers so that you can gather all the materials necessary to write your review on that topic. Organize the information you've gathered into an outline that you'll submit for critique. Then once your outline has been critiqued and you've got your outline in the shape you need it to be, you can develop your outline into a rough draft by taking each of your bullet points and turning those into sentences and paragraphs that describe the information for each section of the paper. A rough draft is just that. It's not a final complete paper, and you need to proofread it, you need to review it, and then also it's helpful to get comments from others, and I will be providing comments for most of your papers so that you can then refine your rough draft into a final draft. Now for the paper grading, the introduction and hypothesis statement is going to be about 25% of the grade of the paper, so you want to make sure that you do a good job of reviewing the material that set the stage for your report. You'll summarize your major papers. That's another 25% of the points that you can earn for your research paper. You'll include your summation of the author's analysis of the data, and that's worth about 20% of the grade for the paper. We'll also want you to include your interpretation, which is about 15% of our assessment of your paper. And then your overall quality of writing. Now, this is listed as 15% of the paper, which is a relatively small percentage of the total weight of the paper. However, you have to also recognize that if you write in a style that is not clear, it will affect how your reader will be able to interpret the introduction, the summary of the major papers, the author's interpretation. So the quality of writing, while it has its own separate overall scoring, if it's poor, it can affect all of these other sections, and if it's excellent, it can affect all of these other sections. So you'll want to pay attention to, am I describing things clearly? Do I have things well organized? Okay, first assignment for this class is for you to, by Friday at midnight, to submit 2 topics that you find interesting in physiology. They could be topics that you'd like to think about as the topic you'll do your research on for your paper, but they don't have to be. Just a couple of places or things that you are interested in relevant to physiology. If you know of a source that provides information on that topic, you can provide the link to that source as well as a statement on the topic. When you submit something to me, I'd prefer that you write not just a name, don't just say cardiac physiology, but say what it is about cardiac physiology that's interesting to you. Write a full sentence, and that will help me to give you some feedback. And I'll be providing you some feedbacks on the topics that you submit, and I hope that for some of you this will help you select the topic for your term paper. This is the end of this presentation, and the next presentation will be on searching the literature so that you can find papers that will help you with your research paper this summer. Good luck to all of you.